All right, well, good morning. I guess I don't want to say it's a special edition of Coffee Talk, but I just finished up a very, very long conference call this morning over a right to appraisal. And a lot of things came up in the call that I thought, you know what, it's just time that we talked about this a little more. It seems to be right to appraisal is being used by a lot of people. Great. If it's in the policy, wonderful. If it's a state statute mandated, wonderful. I think it's one of my two things. I think only the only things I think we should be talking about in this industry is a right to appraisal mandatory statute, and then um, a disclosure bill for consumers. But unfortunately, when something new comes along, a lot of people jump on it very quickly, thinking it's something that they can do, and they think it's a blue ocean and there's money to be made as an independent adjuster or whatever. And then some shops have thought, oh, this is a great way to just get paid what I want to get paid to fix a car. And now there's some problems. I kind of think about it like scanning and calibration. So 2015 comes along and suddenly, it's like everyone just discovered fire when they found scanning and procedure OEM position statements and everything. And so everybody went out and bought a scanner and everybody was invoicing, and all of that seemed wonderful for 5 or so years. And then the insurers started to behave differently, and now we are where we are. So let's talk a little bit about right to appraisal. I'm not going to share the case I just finished, but I am going to share sort of a background on the case with you and talk through some of the things that happened on this one because it went all the way to umpire. So this was a right to appraisal on a Tesla. What seemingly, I always say on the surface, looks like minor damage to the rear of a vehicle. This just looks like a bumper scrape with a little bit of paint damage into that quarter panel. So how could this one possibly end up in a right to appraisal? And it did. The timeline on it, one of the first things is RTA isn't simple. Sometimes you can handle them and they move fairly fast, and that may be 2 to 4 months. And then sometimes they move really slow, like this one. And then sometimes they get elongated even past 6 to 8 months because of how the hired IAs are handling it. So if there's not some experience level, that can cause some delays as well. When the supplement discussions, the final supplement discussions on this file were July of 2024, and that's when RTA was invoked. And it finally reached an umpire decision of March of 2025. So there was a lot of things in this one to talk about and show as examples. One of the biggest things right now is just even invoking the RTA. So there are some skill sets and some knowledge that is required by whomever is going to be a representative either for an insurer or a representative for a consumer. There are some things that need to be covered first before RTA is invoked. So we don't just go, well, I got an estimate and they don't like my estimate, and so let's go straight to RTA. One of the things that's even more additional training is the preparation of your file. So as a body shop, you have to think about your file, and have you prepared for things to be handed off and for anyone else to get involved and pick up where we left off? Or did you create sort of a mess and then try to hand it off to an independent appraiser? Number one, the customer must choose a disinterested appraiser. The insurers are getting more and more caught up in this one. Even in language where it just says they must be a qualified, like if you say it's policy language and it says must be a competent appraiser, there is that underlying that they must be a disinterested third party, a disinterested appraiser. That goes both ways for the insurance company and for the shop side. If a particular shop is suddenly always using one person to do their RTAs, that's going to trigger some red flags and some flares, and you would find that the next couple of customers, everything's great for a while. I always tell people this is easy until there's a problem, right? Anybody can do it until there's a problem. Then when when the insurer starts to dig in their heels and not want to deal with that one particular appraiser, there can be some problems. There could also be some problems with licensing if it's involved. So we want to make sure that the appraiser is disinterested, and that means the customer needs the choice, and the customer needs to choose between multiple appraisers. It doesn't always need to be, we got a guy, we're going to do this for you, we're going to tell you who to use. Make sure that there's a list of 3 to 4. And that also, now you have a lot of examination under oaths happening as part of a right to appraisal. And that will be part of the line of questioning is how did you find out? How did you hire the appraiser you hired? Can you show that you paid the appraiser you hired, or did that check come from directly a body shop? So if a body shop is constantly paying the appraiser, then that's a problem. SIU will get involved with those. Um, the second one, choosing a trained appraiser, like we want to make sure, unfortunately, there's people that believe that right to appraisal is just about writing a damage estimate to repair a car. That's what a body shop does. That's where that skill set is needed. When it comes to right to appraisal, the person that's hired needs to be versed and trained in negotiating and presentation of a damage report and all the other things that go with it. I have some very skilled, respected people that handle RTAs that could not write an estimate to save their life. They use a service to help them with that. But they're very well versed in claims, law, how to move the chess pieces around the table. We just tend to think somebody used to be a body shop owner or used to be an estimator, and great, they're going to do my RTAs now. I'm going to open my own IA firm and I'm going to start handling right to appraisals. That ability to write the damage report is a very small portion of what it takes to be successful. So we want to make sure that if we're recommending 2 to 3 people to a consumer, that they are actually trained and they can do what they need to do when it goes off the rails, right? When it's not all perfect and it doesn't just go the perfect way. Do you know what you're doing to, like I said, move those chess pieces around? The next thing that's becoming more and more apparent is insurers just refusing to accept the invocation of the RTA for various reasons. We've had one insurer say that it's not within the time frame. There's some policy language around proof of loss that has to take place, but that doesn't really apply to RTA. We've had some policy language basically just says that we both have to agree to RTA. So if I don't agree, then I don't agree. There is no RTA. So you want to check through your policy languages when you have refusals. Sometimes it can be how it's invoked. We don't accept an email. We want to have registered certified mail, whatever that is. One of the latest trends right now is condition of the vehicle. So if the vehicle's already been repaired, they'll say that based on the condition of the vehicle, the RTA doesn't apply. It's an attempt to say that the right of inspection, so one of the insured's duties early in the policy has been permanently taken away. So they can't reinspect the car. You took that away from them by repairing it, and so we're not going to honor an RTA. And then one that's starting to enter from our homeowner side of the fence that has to do with so for my entire career, I didn't deal a lot with RTA on the auto side. When we did, it was typically over total loss discrepancies, not on repairs, but we did RTA a lot on the homeowners side. So it's always really been a clause in homeowners. Scope is something that you hear homeowners talk about all the time. It technically also applies to auto, but we replaced scope with estimate. So we've always said that the supplementation process and all that is really sort of an agreement on scope. This is where it becomes critical when you're not rekeying and supplementing yourself, so to speak, by looks. That scope can be skewed at that point. That's the insurer trying to get you to change scope in a lot of ways. There's some deviousness to why shops are asked to rekey and write supplements on themselves and those things. But out of scope has started to happen. And what scope is that we must agree on the damages. In our world, we think the damages means the amount of the estimate, but that's not the case. What is damage? So in other words, we agree that it's the bumper and the fender. We just don't agree on how much it is to repair the bumper and the fender. If it's a bumper and a fender for the insurer, but the body shop's got bumper and fender and then a quarter panel and a door, then you could make a case that we're out of scope. We don't agree on the damages of the vehicle. You're going to see that one enter a lot. It's morely an attempt to push more things to court versus right to appraisal. Most shops won't hire an attorney. It's not the customer's job to go out and find an attorney in these situations. If you're offering and suggesting and talking to them about right to appraisal and that they should do it and they should sign here and authorize this or whatever, you probably need to make sure you have an attorney. You should have one anyway already. Like you need to have a business attorney who's versed in our issues, who can, step in when needed and write a letter and do the things they need to do. We'll get down the rabbit hole on these. I get a lot of these sent back to me right now where the shop has recommended somebody that they found on a Facebook post that they thought was going to be able to handle it. And they had done 5 or 6 of them previously. Those had all gone swimmingly well. And then suddenly now we have a problem because that disinterested party, the insurance company, got tired of seeing the same name. Now there's a problem, and that person just didn't know what to do. And so their solution was to ignore the file for like 3 to 4 months, not update the shop, not update the customer. And then there's like, well, I don't know what you expected me to do. The insurance company just stopped responding to my emails, or the IA stopped responding to me. And, I don't know what to do. I guess you're going to have to go handle this yourself. And then they keep the customer's money that was paid for an RTA. And then I get them in this state, and we're trying to put them back on the track. So out of scope's going to happen a lot. Shops, this one becomes your duty. If you're going to tell customers to pursue RTA, it's going to be your job to make sure that you create a file that leaves no doubt that there is a scope agreement. There is just a differences in damages. And then the other thing that's affecting people right now is shops are taking assignments of benefits, which is, you can't do that. Like, you can, assignment of proceeds is one thing, and assignment of benefit. RTA is a benefit in the policy for a first party. Now, if you're in a state with a statute, like a Rhode Island or whatever, but in a policy, if you're invoking it as part of policy language, it's policy benefit. You'll notice inside the policy, there's always a clause that says benefits are not assignable. So we have insurance companies that as soon as they find out an AOB has been taken by the shop, they immediately close the file. So you can't take over that from it's a policyholder benefit. So as soon as the policyholder steps out, the insurer is going to close the file. It's up, everybody's got a different interpretation of that. If I was still sitting in claims, I would close every file if a EOB was taken by a body shop, because I clearly have a clause in my contract that says a customer can't do that. So now we're closing the file. So assignment of proceeds just means that when it's all said and done, kind of like everything else, you'll just get the payment for the damages. But some shops have tried to step in and basically say, hey, the customer, I don't want the customer to have to deal with this. I'm just going to do it on my own. And that's causing some problems right now as well. Just some things that are going to get in the way. So once your customer decides to do this and says, I want to invoke this, there's a lot of hurdles that we can get to before we even get to the money part. Make sure you're using somebody that knows what to do through every objection and how to move these things along. All right. The next thing about RTAs is that we want to try. We had a really long class during COVID on the World Fair, where Larry and Mark Olson and I sat around and we talked about this. RTAs are the four corners of the policy. And that means that all of the outside influences that we think are important in this industry, what we think we know about a car, or what we think we know about rates, or any of those things, are not applicable during the RTA process. So you can only talk within the allowances within the four corners of the policy. If I want to reinterpret policy language and benefits, if I want to argue that doesn't apply, well, that's what court does. That's not what an RTA does. In this particular Tesla RTA, the handling insurance company, so Cincinnati Insurance, had sent that to a field claims manager, and there was some yah-yahing back and forth before it went. And a couple of points that brought out in this file. The existence of something on another vehicle doesn't mean that it exists on that vehicle, because we are in the four corners of the policy. So sometimes I have shops that'll send me and go, well, they've paid this 12 other times in the shop, or this insurance company's paid me, so whatever. It's within the corners of that policy. The existence of it on other files doesn't necessarily mean that it's considered in the RTA. Again, if we want to do that, if we want to say what a market is, we would have to do that through court, not through the RTA itself. So RTAs don't do policy and coverage decisions. They don't do any of those things. So we have to work within the scope of what that policy has. And so that was what this email from this claims manager is basically saying. Look, just because it's been paid in the past by either an incompetent or untrained appraiser, whether that's staff or hired external, doesn't mean that we have to pay it on this claim. And he is correct. There is nothing that says that. Specifically in this state in New York, We've got a case that was won. Larry and Mid Island did it, and the court agreed they were owed $125 an hour to fix a Nissan. And then the very next week, the insurer came in and went right back to writing everything at $65 an hour because we were told to pay you 120 on that car, but this is a new car and a new day. Um, and that's something often lost. We sometimes feel that because we're getting it over here, or getting it from other places, that we're entitled to that. Labor rate is another thing that does not do well in an RTA. So in other words, I'm in the four corners of the policy. However, the policy says that it determines what's owed. um, if there's a market rate for something, I umpired one last year. Shop got really angry. They wanted a much higher labor rate per hour. The insurance company's adjuster, appraiser, that was hired did a really good job of presenting how the market labor rate was established and validating that X number of certified shops within a 15-mile radius of the customer's garaged address did the work for X amount. That was pretty clear, right? Like they did a great job in how they submitted their labor reports and evaluations in, and we'll talk about submitting all that stuff in Umpire a little bit later. So that's another thing to think through. Some things are RTA-able and are valid in an RTA, and some things really aren't, and they're probably not going to go the way you think they want to go. The consideration of an expert opinion. So we always talk about that one of the options before RTA or one of the options before small claims court or trial or whatever is the submission of an expert report or an opinion, and insurers do it all the time. Unfortunately, this one was a mistake. And this probably should not have been sent to the customer and the body shop. In this case, Cincinnati insurance companies took the shop's estimate and sent that to this Josh Kirkham, who has the title of Material Damage Specialist 3. May want to change that job title because I'm not sure if so does 3 mean that you were a 1 and then a 2, and so you've had a couple promotions through material damage specialist before you got this. So what does it take to be an expert? You want to make sure your expert's actually an expert. So Josh, when I look at his background, thankfully because of LinkedIn, that's not a great background. I would not consider that person potentially on the surface to be of expert quality in the opinion that they give based on their job experience, right? I always tell people I don't put myself out as a material damage expert. That's why I have friendships with Larry and friendships with other people. My job is claims. That's my expertise. So careful what you say you are. I believe, in the end, the claims manager hung his hat and forced this into RTA because of this opinion that was given by this specialist. As a shop, you can seek an expert opinion as well. It doesn't always have to be the insurance company seeking an expert opinion. We seek those sometimes as insurers. We will seek those internally. So, Cincinnati here has their material unit. State Farm has one called the crash unit, or had one. It really doesn't exist anymore. You can use outside experts in homeowners, and a lot of times even in auto, we would hire engineers to go out and do engineering reports and send those back to us about damage. You can do that thing too if you want to. Sometimes an expert report is cheaper than RTA, faster than RTA, and can get a claim moving a lot faster. But if somebody does provide an expert opinion, then you're going to want to make sure that that is passed on to whomever the customer hires, because we're going to see all of this stuff again, right? Like this expert is probably going to pop up in whoever represents the insurer. So we drill a little bit into his background. We're not real pleased with that. Just tell you how quick. This is just funny. I'm gonna share this because this cracked me up when I was reviewing this file to see these here. So that's Josh's background. He a car star, then he went to a Progressive, then an Abra, and then now he's at an insurance company. I bet they think he's pretty cool because he has a shop experience. I always worry about those people that tell me they had shop experience. So in his note, he talks about how they get really hung up on the refinishing, so Uniside refinish, and so Josh here played PowerPoint doodle and made a little diagram here of how he expects this vehicle to be refinished. This is going to come into play a little bit later, based on his refinishing and where he thinks the clear should stop and the paint should stop, and we're gonna foam mask and tape some jams, and we're gonna back edge tape some shit, and we're gonna kind of halfway paint this thing is his response. What I found interesting is as he goes line by line, we get to line 136, and he has no description as to what this even is. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you're a material damage expert. You've listed yourself as an expert. You're giving an opinion that prevents a customer from being paid the damages to their vehicle. Now they're going to have to exercise a policy benefit and spend more money because, and you don't even know what this is. Like, like for the love of fucking donuts, just Google, right? Like, like this should be a no-brainer. If you've been around cars at all, this should be a no-brainer based on the other things that would be on the estimate as well. In there, you should know exactly what that is. And then if it wasn't bad enough, if his line item report for line 136 on the shop items doesn't glaringly show us that he is not a qualified material damage expert, we get to line 141 for water leak test. And he says it doesn't warrant a water leak test because there's no structural damage, damage to either door causing opening issues, or anything to support the need for this operation. Yeah, you may want to reconsider the inclusion of an expert report if that's what they write. Um, I was pretty happy that they had included that, because when I get these, my back end responses, I don't want to do RTA at this point. I want to go to court, because I'm going to basically, at the end of it, this could become a pretty nice bad faith suit, right? When we rely on incompetent, I don't want to say incompetent, or untrained opinion, and we do something to the detriment of the customer, there are consequences for that in the insurance industry. There should be more consequences. I think these days we might get some better handling. I think there's too many people in claims that are too separated from consequences. So things happen and you get served, and these adjusters never know. They never know those things got made to corporate. They never know those things happen unless it goes so bad where we have to depose them. So I would love to see more consequences, so that people understand that not always just because you think you've never had a problem, you may have had a problem and you just don't know it. Kind of like cars that get traded in. I have a lot of shops go, we don't have comebacks. Yeah, you do. You just don't know about them, right? The customer trades the car in. So they double down on this, and this is the other thing that I want to kind of bring out, because this is also starting to happen a lot as well in RTAs and in court cases. This is starting to happen. So our Mr. Ward here, who is not, I look, to get a CPCU takes a lot of time, energy, and studying. You cannot be an idiot and get that. There's a lot of work there to that. So he is an educated, probably lots of experience, probably my age, based on all of those, and that, been in claims a long time. But he doubles down on what his expert sends him. So his material damage, we're all very hung up in this refinish. And to rebut based on the diagram of what is shown by the material damage expert, we now include a video that's been found on YouTube. Lots of interesting things that are happening lately in claims. Like I find parts on estimates that are sourced from eBay, and some other things. But this inclusion of videos has become sort of an epidemic. There are certain individuals that show up more often in court submissions, or depositions are mentioned. Blue Collar Kyle is one of them. He works at Schaefer Autobody, which is an OE certified collision center. And unfortunately, some vendors in our industry have taken this person to SEMA and put them in booths and sort of like promoted them to the industry. There is another individual that they are doing the same things with, where you have frame machine companies and welding companies and people like putting them out there thinking, well, these people are getting hundreds of thousands of views. We're going to get advertising off of it. What the insurance companies have done with this is they've taken that and said, well, this is industry standard. So these people are making videos, they're putting them out there. They're being praised not only by the view count and the likes and the comments from generally our own people, but because the industry has taken these people and they're taking them to events and they're putting them in magazines and they're having articles done or whatever. This must be the standard. And so every time somebody makes a video that is in contrast to best practices or in contrast to what an OE says, and it gets put online, whether it's a YouTube or a TikTok, or it gets put out into one of our forums, and people praise it, or then people say, you're mean for being negative, or you're mean for being this. This is the consequence. So I want everybody to see this in black and white. this stuff gets sent to consumers and being told. So when a consumer is told the body shop is charging you for things that are not needed, or they're just going to end up totaling your vehicle, they're sent videos from people in our industry that we have put out. I'm going to say we, as an industry, that we've made them heroes. And so I hold the equipment companies. I will forever hold you responsible and accountable for that. Like, I'm a big fan of marketing and advertising. I think it's great, but we have to be careful what we promote in this industry, because I don't blame an insurer if we're towing these people around to industry events. If we're putting them in booths, if we're having magazines write articles on them, then why wouldn't they be our industry standard? So those are coming back. You need to be aware of that when you get those. I would love for one of these to not settle. I had one recently that was over repairs of a Honda, and I was very much looking forward to deposing everybody, like the tech, um, the body shop manager, the body shop owner, everybody. I mean, it was like let's just get everybody in here and make it as uncomfortable as possible. So when you see things online, be careful what you celebrate, because the insurers are definitely using that against us right now, in that respect. Now, documentation. The shop did a very good job in prepping for this. They documented everything that was done in photographs. So every line item for everything had a picture and it was corresponding. I always say we don't necessarily have to, we don't upload that. We don't turn all that stuff in right away. But it does come in handy when now we're going to have to go a little bit further. We're going to have to go additional steps to explain what we're doing to someone that may not have done this for a living. Our umpires or our adverse IA don't necessarily be body shop people, and we can't demand that in either RTA initial hiring or in the umpire hiring. So the body shop did a great job of documentation on this one. So where did we end up? The insurer's final estimate was $9,316.24 to repair this Tesla. The shop's estimate was $17,101. I'm sorry, 105.51. That's a drastic difference. And so when we have that much of a difference, RTA can be an option. Small claims court was out based on the limits of the state. So here's where we sit. We needed to decide what to move forward. The customer chooses their appraiser and invokes the RTA. At that point, an expert court review is done of the estimate. And here's what that's important. A lot of people think, well, I just need to rewrite the estimate. And that's true in some ways. We do want to readdress the estimate, but we want how that estimate is readdressed to be something that you would stand on firmly if you were going to court. So we treat RTA in the initial process and in the umpire process like court. So that's when we say you want to make sure you get a trained professional. This is where the guy that was a body shop estimator for 10 or 12 years doesn't do so hot. It doesn't mean that they can't necessarily be involved, but this is where they don't do so hot. So now we're going to get into, the actual explanation of why this is needed. And it has to be beyond, here's the OE repair procedures and here's my estimate. That doesn't break down the whys, particularly, and I'm going to say it again, particularly when there is evidence and videos that are going to be sent in saying, this is why we don't pay this. Here's a person that celebrated and they don't do this. And so this is why we didn't owe this. They're not saying, I want to be very clear, the insurance companies are not saying we don't owe it because we don't want to pay it. In a lot of cases, they're putting forth a lot of detail into why they don't think they owe it through their chosen IA. But the expert review on this Tesla was $22,077.51. And so we had a $12,000 deficiency from the insurer, but we also had almost a $5,000 deficiency from the repair shop. That gets broken down. Every line item on that estimate has to be explainable and supportable through documentation, either through the estimating system or through the OE or through the repair procedures or through the process, best practices, paint companies, etc. All that has to be pretty solid and has to be explained. So if we go back to the expert opinion that was given by the insurance company when they went line by line, that's basically what has to happen. One of the biggest mistakes I see made, specifically when it comes time to go to umpire, in the initial stages of the IA, hopefully the customer's IA and the insurance company's IA get together and they can have conversations and we can exchange our information in a a community style, coffee talk, so to speak. But when we go to umpire, those things are over. At that point, I always give my reports to the opposing IA in the initial phase. And then when we go to umpire, it is a completely different scenario. Because now there may not be an umpire selected that has the background you want. When it comes to choosing an umpire, we can't handpick them. We try a lot of times. You'll submit your list, they'll submit their list. We hope we find somebody. We try to vet them. We hope we find somebody that has a little bit of understanding. But I can't just refuse because you didn't hire Larry. I want Larry, or I want Mark Olson, or I want Robert McDormand, or any of those people. I can't just say that. And then if I go to court appointed umpire, well, that's a Russian roulette. Basically, you may get somebody good. You may get the judge's best friend who plays golf, who retired 3 years ago. And so I have to prepare as though I'm presenting to those people. So this is what preparation for umpire looks like. It's not just send in your estimates, your photos, and your OE position statements, and then think that this third party is going to see things your way, specifically when they're going to be sent a lot of adverse information as well. We want to treat it like court testimony. So this is my opportunity to basically lay out, and I assume that the person reviewing this doesn't know anything. One of my, I want to say, one of my positions when I was very young in claims, I didn't have an assigned desk. So when you were on the CAT team, you were sort of a floater, and you would float in and you would backfill wherever you were needed. Now, the beauty of that is that you got exposed to a whole lot of claims and a whole lot of different scenarios that you probably never would have. And working arbitration was one of the gifts that I was, we're going to go to arbitration, and you're going to present, and you got to prepare a file, and you got to copy this file, and we got to mail this file off, and all that. And I learned pretty quickly that the people on arbitration boards, even the ones internally within insurance companies, weren't necessarily always the best trained. That person may be there because they were really great with bodily injury claims, and this person may be over there because they were really great with fire losses or whatever. So I had to prepare the file in a way that told the story where anyone with no matter what background would see things my way. And if I did a better job at telling the story, I had a better winning percentage. And so when we treat it like court testimony, I say, this is what a typical umpire submission would look like, right? Like there's tabs. You're going to have a summary report that on the front side of that basically in one page, if they don't want to look at all your documentation and they just want to take you at your word that you've proved it, then in that front page, I want to have a summary. And then everything after that is an example of why this and this, and then what the rebuttal for that would be and why that rebuttal is inaccurate or whatever. That umpire doesn't have to call you. I think a lot of people think you submit to an umpire, and then if they have questions or whatever, they'll call you. A lot of people in the industry selected as umpires that don't have claim background will do that. They'll be like, "You got any more pictures? Could you call the shop and ask them if they have anything?" True umpires or a court appointed umpire is not going to do that at all for you. It's going to be whatever you submitted, and you have to go for it. The better the case submission, the more I want to say a lot of times the better it looks, the better that is. So I can go to umpire and not always have to try to handpick one of my people because of that way. Learning how to prepare through that process, you have to prepare from day one that this is possibly what's going to happen. You can't go back at a later date and then get a file ready to go into those. The first appraiser that the customer hires, let's hope that it's a pretty simple RTA and the customer invokes and the insurer hires their guy. We go back and forth and we reach a settlement pretty quickly. That's the ultimate scenario. We would love for that to happen. But even at that moment, that hired IA has to start planning and treating things as if they're going to get to this stage. There is some best practices for that submission. There's some best practices for the whole process and how it needs to go. And it's one of the things that we just haven't taught well. So what was the outcome for this one? Well, the actual outcome was the umpire awarded $22,517.83. They even awarded more than what the expert appraisal was. There's no explanation in the award. They don't owe you that. You can sometimes call. It's kind of like polling a jury after a verdict. You can sometimes call and ask them, why did you reach this opinion? Whether it's positive for you or negative. But they're not entitled. They can just do an award sheet and say, this is my award. Don't know why the extra money was there. There must have been something in the paperwork that they found that they believed there was some additional monies owed on it. But in this case, Our claims manager got so caught up on the refinishing process and bad information from their expert that they forced this to Umpire and ended up paying more than what they even the shop wanted in this case. And so it was just a great example of a lot of little things that go wrong based on the expert report that was submitted and being in the file. It allowed for an Umpire file to be created way better. You already knew what their objections to a lot of things were going to be based on what that expert had wrote, and so that allowed that file to be created with a lot more detail in it. Now, we had a claim school earlier this year. It was great. We limited it to 12 people. You came in and you spent a whole week with myself and Mark Olson and some other special guests that we had in. And we went over an introduction to claims and claims law. And then we dug into post-repair inspections, right to appraisal, DVs, etc. And it was great. The only problem with that is now is everybody's busy. Money's not exactly great. Buying a plane ticket and a hotel room and spending a week somewhere training is a luxury that a lot of people would want to do but just can't do. And then being out of your shop for all of that time or away from your business for all of that time if you are already a practicing IA. So Mark Olson and I sit down over the last couple of weeks because the amount of referrals to us for right to appraisal problems or customers that have been abandoned by the initial IA that they'd hired and now they need somebody, to pick it up and keep going has increased exponentially. We are going to go and do just an RTA class virtual. There are some claims and some claim things that we want you to learn. We will send that to you virtually and let you complete those as online classes. And then July 29th through the 31st, it will be 3 days of online virtual training. There will be 2 sessions per day, so we're not going to take up your entire 8-hour day. We're going to do a couple of short sessions each day so that you can still work in your shop, you can still work in your business, you can, go get the kids from school, you can do whatever you need to do. There will be, all the documentation will be sent in a form. So all the files, this is going to have case studies, we're going to have court cases, we're going to have right to appraisals that settled fine. We're going to have right to appraisals that went to Umpire. We're going to have all of these different, sample files, sample cover reports, all of these things for you. We will email them to you prior so that you'll have all the documentation. You won't just be watching our PowerPoint. As we talk and go along, you'll be able to flip your pages. We recommend that you print that stuff out and get ready to dog tag it and everything. And then we'll take your live Q&A during each of those sessions. So if you've had bad experiences or you've had good experiences or you have questions, that are going to be your chance to do it. Later on in the year, in August, we will do the same style for diminished value and how diminished value works inside the body shop and then works for consumers. That will be a 2-day class. We will do that in August. But this class is available now on the website. You can go sign up and go ahead and reserve your spot. It's an online class. We're not going to limit it. We limited the live class to 12 people. This one we won't limit. If you can log on and watch it, great. There will be replay. So we understand that even though you wanted to try to dedicate time to the second session on a Wednesday, something can happen and pull you away, so that if you do miss that, there will be some replays for that. And then following that class, Mark and I are going to offer 30 days of support. If you're one of our VIPs, we already support you, that's fine. If you're not, after the class for 30 days, so for all of August, Mark and I will support you in your RTAs and your questions. So it's kind of like having a coach for an additional 30 days. So if you are running a business where you're handling RTAs and you've been struggling because things are getting difficult now and insurers are having different tactics, and how do we prepare and how do I train the shops I work for to prepare for these things, we'll have 30 days of support for that. So go on to collisionhub.com, onto the website. You can go into live training, so it's under the live training section, and you can go ahead and register and reserve your spot. And then Mark and I will see you July 29th to talk about all the changes. And I'm sure by July 29th, there's going to be even more changes as more law and some more cases get tried. There are a couple of bad faith claims around court cases around right to appraisal right now. And then there's a couple that have settled very quickly out of court and on NDA. And so while we can't talk about the specifics, we will talk about why the insurance company settled those bad faith claims on RTAs with the non-disclosure agreement. So we'll see you in July. Thanks, everybody.